All right, thank you. It's always fun to get to be on these live events. So I'm going to be talking about automated evaluation of LLM apps, or you can think about AI apps, RAG apps, like all these new kinds of apps that are using large language models like the OpenAI chat completion API, right? And I'm going to show a tool that I've built that uses the azure-ai-generative SDK and has a lot of more tools on top of it to give you an idea for what kind of workflow we could use to do this automated evaluation. So if you want the slides, I went ahead and already uploaded them because I know that people often want the slides. So you can get the slides at aka.ms/rag/eval/slides. And yeah, then we'll keep going with it. There you go. There's that link. Okay, so first let's just talk generally about types of LLM apps. This is a really broad, and I just made up these types today, but I want to distinguish between what I'm calling prompt only and then RAG apps. So prompt only kind of LLM app is mostly relying on customizing the prompt. I think you might also call these like custom GPTs. So really just customizing the prompt, maybe also providing some examples, which is what's known as a few shot. When you do few shot prompting, it's you give the prompt and you give some examples of the kind of output you want. And the goal is to get answers in a certain tone. And I found there's this GitHub repo, awesome chat GPT prompts, where people have lots of cool ideas for prompts. And I actually have one this is in the Azure OpenAI Studio Chat Playground, which is a really great tool for just doing experimentation, with these prompts. So I actually put the interviewer prompt in here. So it was like, I want you to act as an interviewer. And this I think is a really interesting one because it actually flips the script and has chat, the bot actually asking me the questions. And usually I'm the one asking the bot the questions. So here I can say like, oh, I'm interviewing for a Python programmer position, right? And there you can see, okay, let's start the interview. And can you tell me about your experience with Python programming? I've coded Python since college. It wasn't even invented that long before then. And projects, I wrote a lot of the Khan Academy code and Coursera code and stuff. But this is really cool. I'm basically having a mock interview, and this is purely based off of the system message. So we're able to use just a system message to get this customized experience, with the large language model. We could also add few shots here if we wanted to give examples of the kinds of questions we wanted to ask and what answers, we might give. But we can get really far with just a system message. So you can do quite a lot with just system message and few prompts. And you can see lots more examples in that repo. The other kind of app, and this is the one I actually spend most of my time working on, this is these apps that use RAG, which stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. So this is combining a prompt with domain data from some knowledge base, often like an internal knowledge base or just some specific knowledge base, in order to get answers that are grounded in that knowledge base. So this is the kind of app you're building if if you're trying to have a chatbot respond accurately about some information, right? So we have so many people deploying these sort of RAG apps these days, and it's an incredibly popular thing to do because it can make information much more accessible, right? Like the classic example we give is an HR handbook. And it might seem kind of boring, but it's also really helpful because, nobody likes to look through HR PDFs for their company, right? It's just not fun, especially when you're like trying to figure out medical insurance and stuff like that. So you can build a RAG app that uses LLM plus a knowledge base. So in this case, I'm using Azure OpenAI plus Azure AI Search. And here I can ask any questions about, stuff that's in there. So what does a product manager do? So I'll ask that question. And this is all using this repo here. This is an open source repo. So if you do want to develop a RAG application, I recommend our repo. It's got quite a few features, and it's been deployed thousands of times. So we've been learning a lot in this repo about how to develop RAG applications. So you can try deploying that yourself if you're interested in a RAG app. So let's see, here we go. So it's answering the question. And what I can do is actually click on this light bulb here to see the thought process. And this is the actual RAG flow. Because when you do a RAG, it's a multi-step operation, because first you have to get the right information to answer the question. And then you give that information to the LLM and say, hey, here's the information we think is relevant. Can you answer the question based off of this information? So what we do is we take the user query, we figure out a good search query based off of that. We use that to search Azure AI search, and we get back, these are all these Azure AI search results. So these are chunks of text from our HR documents. And then we send that information to the LLM. So we say, hey, you need to help employees and you need to cite your sources, and here's the question and here's the sources. And then we get back this answer that's grounded. And we know it's grounded because it has a citation, and we can click that citation to actually see where it came from. So it's really important that the answer is tied to the citation, and that it doesn't answer if there's no valid citation. And we can also see the supporting content here. And we should also be able to click on this PDF and load this PDF as well. Sometimes PDFs take a little bit of time to load in the browser. So there you go. So that is a RAG, a RAG application. And these, I think, can be really, really compelling. But we also need to, be really thoughtful when we make RAG applications, because we're trying to answer questions accurately. And as we know, LLMs can be very creative, and they can make stuff up. They're next word predictors, and sometimes the next word they predict could be a made up word. So we really want to make sure when we're using this RAG technique that, that it's well-grounded answer. So here's a visualization of the RAG flow, right? And we just saw this in that thought process tab, but we get the user question. We use that to search the Azure AI search document database, or whatever database you have. You do a search in it, or you might be using Postgres, MySQL, whatever. Then we take those results and send them to the large language model with the original question, and we get back the result with the citation. And there we go. Here you go. Hey, John. So John gave a great talk earlier today about RAG with Cosmos Mongo vCore. So this is I'm glad that he did it earlier in the day, because this is basically like a follow-up. Like, once you have a RAG app, how do you evaluate it? And John has also done a ton of good work on the repo that I just showed. He's been sending all these pull requests that I need to review soon. So thank you, John, and great talk on RAG earlier today. So if you missed John's talk on RAG, and you want to see how to build a RAG on Cosmos MongoDB vCore, you can watch his session later, because they're all recorded. So when we're developing these apps, we want to know, are the answers high quality? Now, what does it mean to be high quality for a RAG app? It means that they're correct for that knowledge base, not just globally correct, but correct for that knowledge base. So for example, when I asked in this one, what does a product manager do? That should actually be according to this HR handbook. Like, what does a product manager do at this company? Not just what does any product manager do, right? So it's a really subtle form of correctness, especially for things where you could have a valid answer in the kind of the global knowledge space, right? So are they correct? Are they clear and understandable? Generally, that's usually the case with LLMs. They're usually pretty good at being clear, but it's good to check. And are they formatted in the desired manner? This is actually really crucial if you've asked your LLM to respond in a particular way, like with a particular syntax. Like, we ask it, like, hey, put the file names in brackets. And it's really important that we get those file names in brackets, because that's how we know how to do the linking here. And if we don't get in the brackets, then we don't know it's a citation. So that's the sort of stuff we look for, right? And you can see some sample outputs here. Like, this one's got the correct answer and the correct citation. This one, these are both correct, but one of them is like longer than the other. So you know, to think like, which of these is the most high quality answer for your use case? And it's going to depend on your use case and on your domain. And lots of things can affect the quality. So it's not just a matter of, tuning, changing one dial. There's so many different dials that you can change to affect the quality, especially for a RAG app, right? So I am focusing on RAG here because that's what I tend to evaluate the most, and that's where accuracy is just so important. But a lot of this, is also relevant for non-RAG LLM apps as well. But when you're doing a RAG application, there's the things that affect your large language model completion, and that's true for all LLM apps. So the prompt, the few shots, the language of your prompt, is it English or not English? Any history you send in, if you do send in message history, what model you're using, huge differences between 3, 5, and 4, as I'm sure you can imagine. What temperature you're using, 0 to 1 controls the creativity, how many tokens you max it out at. So lots of different things you can parameterize in your LLM call. And then if you're doing RAG and you're searching a document database, well, then it matters what search engine are you using? Are you doing a hybrid search, a vector search, a simple text search? Are you cleaning up the user query before you send it in? How big are your chunks? Like when you take documents, you have to chunk them up before you put them in a database because you can't send it like the whole huge novel to the large language model. You got to chunk it up. So how big are your chunks? How much do they overlap with each other? How many search results you get back? Just so many things that can affect the quality. Oh, and I see another contributor, Aaron. Thank you, Aaron, for your PRs as well. It's so great to see so many community contributed PRs to our open source RAG repo. It's very exciting. I wake up each morning and see the PRs. So when you're, this is like this LLM Ops diagram, right? You're developing an LLM app. What does it look like? So you start with like your brainstorming, right? You get it going, you get it working. That's the important thing to see that it can be done and be like, okay, cool. I've got something that's answering questions the way I wanted to answer. And then you start developing like your standard sample questions that you're testing to see how well they work, and you tweak the parameters and see, oh, that worked good, and you come up with your defaults. Then you really, once you think you have a good set of defaults, then that's when you do the automated evaluation. And that's what I'm going to show is how do we do that automated evaluation step? Because when you do the automated evaluation, then you can start to have more confidence that, oh, okay, yeah, even with a larger data set, these parameters are actually working really well. And when you're feeling confident, then you can deploy apps, the app to users. And at that point, you still need to be monitoring and getting user feedback, seeing which questions aren't, which questions and answers aren't working for users, and continuing to improve and evaluate. That's why this is, it's a flow. It's, when we're making stuff for users, it's always a matter of improving, especially with this very new technology where we're still learning how do we really optimize the quality of the answers from these LLM apps. So manual experimentation. So first thing you want to do is just have some manual way of experimenting with these quality factors, just so you can see, just for yourself what the changes are. So for example, in AI Playground here, there is the customization, the parameters one here. So you click here and you can see, you can change the temperature, right? So 0 is not creative and 1 is most creative. And then you've got everything in the middle. Top is also related to creativity. I actually never use that one myself. Max response caps the number of tokens. So those are all the kind of parameters that you can send to the chat completion call with the OpenAI, the OpenAI APIs. Now in our RAG application, we have something similar here where we can change the temperature. We usually do 0.3, but you could try higher, you could try lower. How many search results we want to get, whether we're using the semantic ranker, whether we want follow-up, whether we're doing hybrid search or one of the other ones. Generally, we want hybrid, but this is all stuff that we can play with. So wherever it is that you're making your LLM application, make sure you do have a way of easily tweaking parameters and being able to see the results. Now, one thing that you also should do that I need to add to our repo very soon is the seed parameter. This is something that they added to the OpenAI APIs a few months ago, where you could add a seed parameter. And then if you do the seed parameter and you hold everything else constant, then you should have replicable output. So this is really helpful when you're doing evaluation, because LLMs are non-deterministic, so they can have different output each time. But if you do that seed parameter, they try to get rid of that non-determinism so that if everything else is the same, you should see the same result. It's a little more detailed than that. They've got a nice cookbook article about it, but I've been adding seed for all my evaluations today, and it's really, really helpful to do it. Okay. So yeah, experimentation. And now let's get to automated evaluation. That's the promise of this talk. So I have this repo, AI RAG Chat Evaluator, and here's the akka for it, akka.ms/rag/eval. So let's go, let me just go to that to prove that that works. Oh, there we go, it opened. Okay, so this is a tool repo that I built that has a bunch of tools, and I designed them to work really well with this, this RAG app, but I'm also trying to make them so that they'd work with other RAG apps as well. It's hard to make tools that are super generic because everybody does things slightly different ways. But all the code is open here, so hopefully it's fairly tweakable and you can adjust it for your use cases. And there's a lot of, there's a long README here, so I recommend reading through that because I won't be able to talk about all of that today. So what this repo can do is it can help you to generate ground truth data, to evaluate with different parameters, and then to compare, lots of tools for comparing metrics and answers across evaluations. So the first step is to have ground truth data. That's the ideal answer for a question. And we typically want like at least 200 question answer pairs. So here we're really talking about doing like a bulk evaluation, because if you only evaluate a few questions and answers, there's a lot of variability in terms of how an LLM is going to respond to a certain question. So you really want to have a fairly large ground truth data set. So I usually go for 200. So we do have a tool here that you can use. You can use this generate command, and it will generate ground truth data. And you just have to tell it, you configure it with an Azure AI search index. So it'll check to look at the stuff that's already in the index, and it'll use GPT-4 in order to generate questions and answers for you. So here we go. So this is the actual code here. And so this is what it's using in the Azure AI-generative SDK. There's this QA data generator class. And we tell it, oh, we want it to generate a long answer. You can also do short answer. I think you can do multiple choice, maybe summary. So they have various types of things you can ask it to generate. We tell it how many questions, and we give it the text. And so in this code here is just connecting to the search. So that's what it does. And then what you get out is this JSON lines file here that has, however many questions. So this one's got like 200 questions, and we can see the question, we can see the truth, right? So this is what it thinks the right answer is according to the document that it read, and we see the citation. So this is the expected citation. So this is our ideal answer. Now, if you're going to use this tool in order to generate ground truth data, you really need to look through that ground truth data and make sure that it is good. So you need to manually curate if you're going to automatically generate this stuff. So you look through it, you say like, is that a reasonable question? Do I want to change that question? Do I want to change the answer? So I ended up removing I think 10 questions from it just because I thought they were kind of too wishy-washy, too generic of questions, that they weren't reasonable to be asked. Okay, so we generate that ground truth data. So we've got that. It's got a question and it's got the ideal answer. The next step is to do the evaluation. So this evaluation is going to evaluate using both GPT metrics and also some custom code metrics. So the GPT metrics are literally sending, it sends off a request to our app and gets back the current answer from our app. And then it sends both, the ground truth and the current answer to GPT-4 and says, hey, here's the ground truth and answer, please evaluate it according to these this criteria. So I can actually show you the prompt, right? So for the groundedness metric, we have a bunch of metrics, but this is the groundedness metric. So it says you'll be presented with a context and an answer about that context. So you need to rate it from 1 to 5. So what we do is we ask GPT-4 to rate something from 1 to 5 based off of whether it meets, whether it matches the criteria in this prompt. So that's groundedness. We also have relevance. So here you can see 1 star means the answer lacks relevance. 5 stars is the answer has perfect relevance. And we have some few shots here as well. So you can see in the few shots some examples of that. And then we also have coherence, right? And you can make your own. So if you have something that you want GPT-4 to evaluate your answers in a particular way, you can make your own, and you just have to, make a new template like this and then add a bit of code for defining it. So those are GPT metrics, and those use GPT-4. I also have a bunch of code, I guess I call them code metrics because it's just Python code, right? So these ones, I look at the length of the answer because it's interesting to see, like, sometimes your LLMs get really verbose and it's like, dang, this answer's a little long. I look at a lot of citation stuff. So like, first, does it have a citation at all? And then does the citation match? So does the answer contain at least the citation that was in the truth? It could also have other citations, but does it at least contain the citation that was in that ground truth data? So this is actually my new favorite metric. This is the one I've been looking at really heavily this week. And then I've got ways of aggregating the stats doing some pandas code. And then we've got latency, which is just how long the actual request took. So you can also add your own custom code metrics, right? So my goal is that it's fairly easy for you to customize this repo for what you need to do as well. All right, so we get that, and then we actually run the evaluate thing with a config here. So, so here's my configuration. What I do is say, like, okay, this is where you're going to get that ground truth data from. Here's where you're going to store it. Here are the metrics you're going to measure. So I don't always measure every metric, especially the GPT ones, because they take more time. So here I'm doing groundedness, relevance, and then the rest of these are pretty fast because they're just code metrics. Here's where the app is. So this could be running locally. This could be on a deployed endpoint. Here I'm using a local one. And then these are parameters I'm just sending in my chat request to the app. So these are parameters that the app understands. So we have a lot of parameters that we can customize just via post. So today I've been messing with like how many search results. I've been messing with temperature. I just change things and then I do a new evaluation. So for example, I know there's so much to talk about. Okay. So imagine that I did that, right? So I did that evaluation. It takes time. So I can just show you from a previous thing, right? It takes a lot of time because it has to hit up your app for every question. And here there's 200 questions. And then it has to hit up GPT-4 for each of the GPT metrics for each question. So that can take a fair bit of time, maybe like 30 minutes or so for 200 questions. So once that finishes, then I can use my review tools. So I've got lots of example results here. So I can show you, like, so this is the summary tool. So with the summary tool, I can go ahead and see, these are a bunch of runs I've done, right? So these were all with different parameters and I can click on them and see on the parameters. This is one where I tried to make it as bad as possible just to see how interesting the results would be. And what I learned is even if you do a really weak prompt, it actually does decently well. And then these were ones where I was trying to refine the prompt. And for each of them, I see the metrics, I see, averages, pass rates, answer length can really vary a lot. And that's one set of them. Today I've been doing that, running it a bunch on another RAG that's on my blog. So here, this is actually a RAG where I can ask questions about anything I've written about on my blog, and it's pretty fun to see everything I've talked about on my blog for the last 15 years. So I was running that a bunch today. So I've got another folder with those results because it's a whole different set of data. And here I was messing with, how many search results. So this is the general idea, is that we run these things and then we can, review them. I also have a tool where we can just like look at the answers here. So I can see like, okay, here are all the answers for that run. And I could sort it and say, let me see everything where it didn't match the citation, right? Because I want to know where is it doing badly, right? And yeah, this one down here, this is textual. So most of the tools are written using textual. So I'll show you another tool. So blog results. So the one I just did was like top 10, right? So this tool compares, if you can compare, two different answers. So in this case, I'm comparing my latest run where I was getting 10 results to the ground truth answer. And we can look at the scores and all that stuff. We could also compare two runs to each other. and compare those questions. And this is all with textualize, which is a way to make command line Python apps. So here I can compare the answers across these 2 runs. And then what I added today in preparation for today's talk was the ability to say, between these 2 runs, only show me the questions where a particular metric changed. Let's see if this is going to work. Yeah. So these are ones where the citation match metric changed, because that's what I actually find the most interesting is for the ones where some metric changed, let me see those and let me compare those to try and get an idea for what it is that is going wrong. So lots of tools, with the hope that one of these will be the tool that you need, but I'm also would love to hear what tools you all are interested in that would help you. Also, pull requests, as always, are great. Use those tools and do evaluation, make sure you have good ground truth data, do lots of parameters, use the seed parameter, track those evaluation results, and you keep improving those ground truth data sets once you go live so that your ground truth data is reflecting what users are actually asking. This is really important. I don't have any users for my sample data sets, but once you have users, you should be updating that ground truth data, especially with the problematic questions like ones that are getting thumbs down in your UI. Next steps is, if you haven't made an app yet, create an LLM RAG app. You could do it with our repo. You could do John's from earlier. Run the tools and see what you learn from them, and join the community. Let us know if there's any issues or if you have ideas for how to make it better.